Hello and welcome. Joining me today to share the stories behind his 10 best spiritual books is meditation teacher, author, interviewer, and charity founder Feroze Dada. Feroze Dada was an international tax consultant in London when a chance meeting with a freedom fighter and a Buddhist monk while on a family trip to Myanmar set him on an unexpected path that transformed the lives of hundreds of orphans and abandoned children being looked after in a remote monastery on the shores of Lake Inle in Burma. Feroze subsequently became a meditation practitioner, interviewer and producer of the online TV series Discovering Humanity and Our One World, and author of Children of the Revolution, A Spiritual Journey to Burma and Buddhism, and his newly released book, The Disciple, The Spiritual Path to Infinite Happiness. Feroze Dada, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. Thank you for having me on your show again. Actually, you very kindly asked me to talk to you some 3 or 4 years ago. So thank you very much. I very much admire what you do to promote spirituality. I admire your passion, your energy, and your commitment. So it's a privilege to be here with you today, Sandie. Thank you.
And thank you for agreeing to submit your 10 best list of books that inspired you the most on your life journey. And what a life journey it's been. We will talk about some of the stories that you share in Children of the Revolution a little later in the show. First, tell me a little bit about what books have meant to you over the years.
This may come as a little bit of a surprise, but in many ways I read little, but what I read I try to pick very carefully and then reflect upon it. And in particular, when I'm writing, I try not to read because I feel it does sort of hinder creative thoughts, and you unconsciously pick up things which are not yours. So what does it mean to me? It means a great deal to me in terms of learning rather than entertainment, and then beginning to be able to practice what I learn. I think this is what it really means to me.
So it wasn't difficult for you to pick 10?
Well, it's always difficult to pick 10 of the best, but in a sense it wasn't difficult because my focus in my new book, and the focus for us to talk about really stems from finding ourselves in a challenging world today. A world which is in war in Ukraine, a world which is in pandemic, a world which we are struggling with climate change and possible disaster, and I fear financial difficulties. So I think the books I've chosen are to help us navigate through these difficulties that we face today. So in a sense, it wasn't difficult because they're directed exactly to where we are today in this challenging time, as I hope we will see as we begin to talk.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the very first one, which is a beautiful novel based on the life of the world's most loved Sufi mystic, Rumi. And the book is The Way of Love by Nigel Watts, and I think it was published in 1999.
You have more knowledge about books than I do, but I suspect this particular book about Rumi might have been at that time, but there have been many books about Rumi and his life. But what I really wanted to, of course, for those of us who don't know who Rumi is, forgive me, and I'll just say he was a 13th century Sufi mystic. And central to the book is really how he meets his teacher, Shams of Tabriz, and how the teacher then changes him. Changes him from becoming an intellectual and a community leader into probably one of the great mystics and poets of all time. And the main point about the book, I feel, is the adage, when the student is ready, the master will appear. When the student is ready, the master will appear. What does it mean? You know, when I was a teenager, I read about this encounter that Rumi had with Shams, and it was like an electrical charge, a vibration, and suddenly they knew that they were going to work together within seconds. I thought this was some sort of myth, some sort of fairy tale, that it could never happen. It was just in the books. But the truth of the matter is that this is how the student meets the teacher. And Sandie, if you were to ask me, what does it mean? What does it really mean? It really means that the master picks up the vibrations of a student who is ready to go on the path. It is not a mind thing. It's not like somebody sending you an email saying, I want to be your student. It is more the master picking up the vibrations at a soul level from the student, and the student giving that feeling of seeking into the universe. And that's how the master and student get together in the spiritual path. But I had to wait a long time for that to happen to me. It wasn't until I was in my 50s that I met my spiritual master, and then I realized that this is not a myth. This is the way the universe operates, in a beautiful way. So this book really is about Rumi's life and how he meets his teacher, and what happens with the teacher and the student, and the transformation of Rumi.
Yeah. And it's not the only Rumi book on your list. You have a great reverence for Rumi, as do many, many, many people. And who wouldn't love his work when they listen to some of the truths that he shares? My favorite is, your children. Your children are not your children. Just the wisdom is just, he's probably, I think, one of the greatest teachers that's ever lived.
Oh, sadly. In a sense, my book, A Disciple, really works around Rumi and his. Let me share something with you, Sandie, and with your viewers, and without. So, I read Rumi when I was probably 20. I thought it was beautiful verses and nice poetry. I read at 30 and at the age of 40. When I read at the age of 50, having gone through some of my spiritual path, and 60, I began to realize what he was really saying. In a way, understanding Rumi is up to your limitation. It's not about what he is saying, but how limited are you yourself to understand the depth of his knowledge. And for that reason, I use Rumi as a little bit of a spiritual guide in my book. Although I have my own Ustad, my guide, he is one who we recognize as poetry. So I've used that as a little bit of a guiding force.
So book number 2 is your own book, Children of the Revolution, A Spiritual Journey to Burma and Buddhism, which you've included because much of its content is sharing the wisdom of the great Buddhist monk at the monastery at the Inle Lake in Myanmar. And also, we should make it very clear to our viewers, because all of the author income goes to the Inle Trust charity to help the children at the monastery. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about this book, a little bit about that experience, and the wonderful work the Inle Trust is doing, looking after these orphans and disenfranchised children.
Thank you for the opportunity. I never miss a chance, because because it means giving it the profile and bringing in the donations and so on. And the biggest gift, of course, was His Holiness the Dalai Lama agreeing to endorse the book. And it was a game changer. It was really a game changer. The amount of influence and the amount of doors that opened is unbelievable. But let me tell you a little bit about the book. If the experience and why it's such an important experience. I met my spiritual master in 2010, and he initiated and became my teacher. And the very next day, I was flying off to Burma. And on this holiday it's a family holiday because my wife, Mumu, comes from Burma, but it was the first time we were going as a family. We were on a lake, and a beautiful lake in Inle Lake, which is surrounded by mountains, the Shan Hills. And on a beautiful sunny day, suddenly the weather changed. There was a thunderstorm, lightning, and so we had to take refuge onto the island. And of course, where do you take refuge in Burma but a monastery? And there, standing on the door, was this monk. And I remember, I can never forget this man, tall man, saffron robe. He stood there, and I was thrown off, literally, physically, by his energy and his personality. And I realized, oh my goodness, what is this man? Anyway, he took us into the monastery, and as the rain and the clouds passed, he said, "Let me show you around." And what he showed us in the monastery was 300-400 orphaned and abandoned children. But what I immediately noticed, that although they had nothing, literally the poorest of the poor, they were so happy. They were just exuding happiness, you know. And that moment, I realized something was happening at this place. And my wife and I committed at that moment that we would help the monastery to become self-sufficient. So the story is in the book, but I can say that over the last 12 years, we've had 12 projects, including a water factory, a farm for growing cereals and food, clinic, dental clinic, educational establishment, and we have 1,200 children there. So even in this time again of war in Burma, the monastery is like a shining star. And but of course, all these things you don't realize, but you gain more than you give. One doesn't realize that at that time. And what the monk did for me was he taught me meditation. Not in the ordinary sense, but over the 12 years, every moment, he said, I think he felt he had to repay me in that sense. And so he would persist, he would teach me meditation. And that really changed my path, really.
The book is very exciting. I mean, you know, you're in the midst of the revolutionary wars, and these children, many of them are orphans or have been abandoned because of those wars.
Cool.
And you've got help from some surprising places and people. And so there's a lot of drama in the book and a lot of excitement. You know, it could be a novel, it could be a movie.
Yeah. See, the drama here was many extraordinary things happened. And Sandie, you'd understand because, well, you'd understand. It was like wishing for something to happen and it would happen. But not only would it happen, but it would be twice as good as you wanted. Let me give you an example. I remember, and this is just one of many. I remember we set up the medical clinic for the children because children were ill, you know, from ringworm and all these little things and difficulties. And I remember we built a clinic, but we didn't have a doctor. Now, this is a very remote part of Burma. So I remember going from the building, taking a boat to catch at the airport. So as I was sitting in the boat, I said, oh, I wish we had a doctor. So I land up at the airport, which is a small airport, Heho Airport. You know, where you stand outside and the planes come and get you. You can literally walk on any plane. And suddenly I see this lady walking towards me. And she says, "Oh, what are you doing?" and so on and so forth. And I asked her, her name, and she said, "Now I'm sure she won't mind my repeating this." She said, "My name is Dr. Jane Dunbar." And I looked at her and said, "My God, I've been waiting for you," I said. And she was a bit alarmed and moved back, saying, "Why is he saying I've been waiting for you?" I said, "I've been waiting for a doctor to come to the clinic." And of course, we parted. I sent a copy of my book. And do you know something? She turned up 6 months later for the launch of the clinic. That's our only meeting, right? And up to this day, 8 years later, she runs the clinic. She looks after the clinic and has inducted many other doctors and so on. So you see, this is only one of so many different things happening, like we could say like magic.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And all true. Book number 3, The Art of Living. William Hart, tell us about this book.
So, so as I mentioned, that the monk was teaching me meditation, and I wanted to learn more about this, understand more about this type of meditation called Vipassana meditation. And the best way to, one of the best books I read on Vipassana meditation is The Art of Living. And this is the Goenka method. And Goenka was actually an Indian who went to Burma and learned this method, which was Buddha's method of teaching Vipassana. Now, the best way I can explain, and explain not the book, but explain the essence of Vipassana meditation, which I have in my own book as well, but just this one phrase will describe what Vipassana meditation is. What Buddha said was this. He said, sensations is a crossroad where mind and body meet. Sensations is a crossroads where mind and body meet. Now, this is bizarre, but basically what he's saying is this, that whenever there is something happening outside, a particular incident, a smell or touch or a sound, the first thing that happens is your body reacts. It's not your mind, your body reacts. Example, let's assume, Sandie, I get angry with you, and suddenly what happens is my heart starts beating, and we start sweating, and the chest gets tight. So there's a body reaction to what is happening. When the body reacts, the mind then picks up this reaction and goes back to something we've learned in the past, maybe another episode of anger. And then suddenly we react. And the reaction is actually almost always irrational because you're reacting. And you're reacting with preconditioned mind. Mm-hmm. So what this meditation teaches you is to not react to body sensations. And this is a breath meditation, a full body breath meditation. And what is the effect of that in general? Is that you act. You look at the situation calmly as it unfolds in front of you. And then you look at it with equanimity, with a sense of balance. And then you act upon it rather than react with preconditioned thoughts. And in many ways, when people talk about mindfulness, I'm afraid it's a word which has been bandied around quite carelessly, I'd say. But the truth is, this type of meditation is Buddha's greatest gift to mankind. There's no question in my mind. Of course, we know about karma and all these things, but this meditation is truly life-changing. And I would recommend this book.
And was this meditation, this form of meditation, taught to you by the monk, or had you learned this before from your own teacher?
No, actually, and again, I described this in A Disciple, what happens, but even he wouldn't teach me that. He said, no, you need to go away for at least 10 days. This is on 10 days of no speaking, no communication, verbal or non-verbal, meditation for 15, 16 hours a day, no less than that, and in seclusion. So he sent me off to another monastery, which specializes in this, and that's where I got my first teachings.
Was it hard?
Yes, to start with. I think the first 2 or 3 days the body is in pain because you're sitting for 15 hours, and then and you're only breathing what we call anapana meditation, just through the sort of breath meditation through the nose. As the energy is building up on the 4th day, the teacher there tells you to move this energy throughout your body. And then something quite dramatic happens. There's an explosion, effectively, in your mind. And the whole body then becomes synchronized. And then you don't feel any pain. You don't feel it. You just harmony of body and soul, just bliss. And so the next 6 days are easier.
Easy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, book number 4 is quite different. The Music of Silence, a memoir by Andrea Buchelli. I've seen I assume it's the movie of the book. What a story.
I bring this in because it's not typical of the other books, as you can see. But yet it is. Yet it is about a man who is truly spiritual. I mean, he is deeply spiritual. And I remember, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a story from my book. But once my book, Children of the Revolution, was released, I had a phone call from an online TV company saying, would I like to do a series called Discovering Humanity, where I could go and interview different people who did amazing things for the world, you know. And I remember the producer saying to me, do you have a dream person who could launch the show? And I said, Andrea Bocelli. And the guy looked at me and said, do you know Andrea Bocelli? I said, no, I don't know him. He said, well, how are we going to get Andrea Bocelli to get you to interview him? But there's a series of things that happen, as I said to you before, that when the universe wants you to do something, and it's in the book, the story is beautiful. And before I knew it, I was in Andrea Bocelli's home. And we were sitting there and I was interviewing him. It was like magic. But why do I say he's so amazing? I say this because, first of all, he said, look, he lost his sight when he was 11. He became completely blind. And what does he say? At this moment of blindness, he said, I felt sorry. I felt sorry for my mother, not for myself. What would she feel? And bang, I thought, my God, this guy has something special. And when I talked to him, I realized that he was really, really far on the spiritual path. And he said to me, I remember saying, people want to come and talk to me about my music, and that's wonderful too. But not very many people come and say, well, what's your spiritual world like? And so for that reason, I would say it is a spiritual book, but it's a light-hearted spiritual book.
Well, it's a very, very inspiring story. Very
yes,
inspiring.
and I think that actually those who are interested, my program, which is called The Power of Silence, is on YouTube, which are Andrea Bocelli, and it's worth watching.
Yeah. So book number 5, Spiritual Power, How It Works by Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. How can we use spiritual power to heal and transform the world?
Now, this is a very interesting book because it's not something that people would generally come across, because it's a sort of Sufi mysticism book. But the reason why I found this so interesting is that Llewellyn actually does not bring religion into this. He keeps spirituality, and as it should be, in my opinion, quite separate. Yet he tackles Sufism, this power of the breath, the power of the universe, in the Sufi way. And now, for a Westerner to do that and articulate it so beautifully, but in short, what he does, and which is what I learned from my own spiritual master when I met him, is this Sufi meditation. It's a breath meditation called zikr or dhikr. And this is a meditation of the heart. What do I mean by meditation of the heart? You see, in Sufi mystical practice, unlike Buddhist meditation, which is a meditation of the senses, smell, touch, mind, cognition, the Sufi meditation is a meditation of the heart. Because the Sufis discovered through their practices that we have the subtle senses as well as our actual physical senses, the senses of intuition, the senses of perception, consciousness, and these are not tangible senses. To give you an example, I mean, a lot of us get a glimpse of that in our lifetimes, and one day you're sitting and say, "Oh, Sandie was just going to call me," and bring the telephone rings. Or I'm sitting with Sandie, I can see what she's thinking. I mean, we get glimpses of this sixth, seventh sense, if you like. And this Sufi meditation refines these senses, these chakras that are in our body, called latifa. And Llewellyn, in his book, really explains it well. And I was impressed. He calls it the energy of life. I read something from him. He said, with every breath, the energy of life flows from the inner to the outer, and our consciousness directs its flow. And so I would, anybody who's interested in this form of meditation, how to understand the unity of everything, of oneness, of the universal energy, and how to feel the world in a different way, actually, not just through our senses, but through our inner senses. The world is much richer, Sandie, as we switch on all our senses.
Yes, indeed.
As you know.
Have you ever interviewed Llewellyn?
Thank you for that suggestion.
Well, when you do, pass him on to me afterwards.
Okay, we have a deal. And if you do first,
okay, deal.
I tell you what, we'll do it together.
Okay, that would be interesting.
Done. Yes.
Done.
Okay. Leave it to me.
Okay. All right. So, book number 6, The Last Barrier: A True Story of a Journey into Ultimate Reality by Richard Field. Now, I also found that there's a copy of this with another title, which is The Last Barrier: A Journey into the World of Sufi Teaching.
I think when they publish books, sometimes each individual publisher does a different type of cover and so on. But I think intrinsically there's the same book. Again, he goes into Rumi, and this is a wonderful story. I think it's a true story of this man called Richard Field, who meets antique dealer in London, I think Bond Street or somewhere, and he realizes that this man is a spiritual teacher, And the spiritual teacher tells them, look, you've got to sell your business, you've got to leave everything if you want to follow the path and come to Turkey with me. So he throws everything away, and then the story begins when he goes on and follows his teacher. I think the main point about this is a repeat of what we talked about Rumi and Shams going on a spiritual journey, or indeed myself on when I met my master. But here, this is an important story because it describes really well that the spiritual master is not teaching you in a normal way. This is really important. He's not teaching you things you understand. So the important thing here is to not question the master, because he's teaching you spirituality and he's been on that path, whereas you're not on that path. And the spiritual way of thinking is different to the physical mind way of thinking. And the hurdles that Rishad goes through to rationalize and not rationalize, if you like, his master's teachings and his requests and his really odd things he does and says. But this is what the path is. And I remember when I met my teacher the first time, the first thing he said to me is, Feroze, throw away those books. Stop going to these lectures. Just sit still in silence, and the world will open up for you, which is one of the things. Again, I didn't understand even a simple thing like that. I didn't understand because books are good, of course, as a way of learning, but on the spiritual path, you have to be careful because it is a experiential learning more than a learning of words. Yeah. If the words can guide you and inspire you, as I say in my own book, I say, look, my job is to just share my journey, but I want you just to be inspired to do your own. What I experience, you may not experience. You will experience something that you need to experience on the path. So I think this book was very interesting, very good reading, and I'd recommend it. It's a beautiful journey and written so well.
Did you? I mean, you had a very, very, very lucrative career. Did your teacher ask you to give that up, or did you choose to give it up to do the work that you've been doing?
Very, very good question, Sandie. Yeah. You know what he did? So I met him in 2005 when he came into my office. I remember the first time he walked in, I didn't realize, but I was feeling happy and joyful. And actually, after the meeting, I remained joyful for days. And every time I met him for an office meeting, I'd be jumping up and down. I didn't know what was going on. Then I asked him, I said, Ustad, I didn't know what he did. He's a client of mine. And I looked after his business affairs. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a spiritual teacher. So I said to him, please, can you take me on? I've been looking to discover myself. And he said, no, you're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. Anyway, he used the word yet, so that was good. And I asked, for the next 5 years, I asked him. And of course, by that time, I was ready to give up. I was ready to give up. And so he waited for me, in a sense, using my energy and force and directing me in this way. I say in my book that it was like the bow leaving, the arrow leaving the bow at the perfect time, because if it had gone earlier, it would not have taken that path. So the master, what does he do? In my case, he waited for me until I was ready to give up my physical life. He was watching, he was teaching me quietly, but not pushing me through until I was ready to give it up. And then he realized that then I was ready to go onto the path in a sort of more committed basis.
Is that when he initiated you?
Yes, so 5 years later, in 2010, initiation is simply a short meditation. And just for those, I can tell you in retrospect what happens in this initiation. At that time, I don't know what happened, of course, but what happens is this, that you begin to see the world in different ways. You see what the world wants from you, not what you want from the world. Yet, so that's why I recognize what was happening at the monastery in Burma. The old Feroze could never have recognized this. He would have just had a good holiday, made a donation, and walked away to his amazing life in Mayfair. And this is not a matter of sacrifice. Never be. I mean, I'm not doing anything because there's a big sacrifice. It's just that you realize that this is a much more satisfying way to live. You're still being selfish in that sense. You're doing it because you want to do it, except that what you want to do is something else.
So when you went back after that experience at the monastery and told your teacher, he wasn't surprised?
Not at all. In fact,
not at all.
Throughout this time, because he realized that in Sufism it's called turning the heart. It basically is your eyes you look at the world in a different way. It's in a way, a very simple process. Sorry, not simple, but yet it is.
Yeah.
It is what the world wants from you, not what you want from the world. Yeah. Yet you want it that way. You want it to be that way. And I realized this when I came to the sanctuary, our Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. I realized I wanted to be involved. I wanted to help. I wanted to teach there. I wanted to be involved in that. And it was no sacrifice. I gained every moment, every time. So I think if more people in this world got their satisfaction and happiness from not just doing what they want, but also in this process helping people, I think the world would be a different place.
Indeed it would. Yes. Book number 7, The Mysticism of St. Francis of Assisi by D.H.S. Nicholson.
Again, this book is uniquely not a religious book. It is about, and I'll read something which it says. What does it say? It's not confined. It says not confined to any one school of thought, nor is it dependent on any particular creed common to the East and the West. It is for everybody. And the main point is, and the reason why I admire St. Francis so much, and I've been following his life and his teachings, is that he was really a mystic monk. He was not a religious priest. He was a monk. And his life teaches us about having regard to the higher self and not just be consumed by our lower self. In other words, not just being consumed by our physical life, but also giving our spiritual life the attention, not only that it deserves, because our soul is also on our journey, on an infinite journey, in my opinion. And if we can balance those two things, in many ways, of course, St. Francis was an extreme example, wasn't he? He actually gave everything. He gave unconditional love to God. But this is only an example for us to follow. If we can just balance our life between the physical and the spiritual, I think we would be much better for it, all of us. And we had a much more compassion, much more love, and much more consideration for humanity, as St. Francis did so much for humanity. So it is an unusual book, because most of the other books that picked up on St. Francis was to do with his life or what he did and his stories, but not as his mystical life. which I think this book, it's a hard read. It's difficult to read, but it's profound.
It's a worthy read.
Yes.
Yeah. So book number 8, perennial favourite of mine and many, many others, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Just beautiful.
Yeah, isn't it?
Mm.
I know it's only 50 odd pages, isn't it, Sandie? Yet every word is so meaningful, and we are limited by our comprehension, not limited by what Khalil Gibran is saying. And the one thing I want to really point out, perhaps, is just, if you don't mind, read a couple of lines.
Go ahead.
Because it has a very important and central theme running through all his teachings in this book anyway. For example, and I think you quoted that earlier on about children. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters for life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. Now, I'll leave that and I'll talk about marriage, because that, in a way, children and marriage go together. So what he says about marriage, give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping. For only the hands of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together. For the pillars of the temple are apart. And the oak and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. Do you know what he's saying, in my humble opinion? He's talking about possessiveness and control. Those facets are so damaging, damaging to our children. We stop them from following their own path in this world, their own journey. We taint them with our prejudices when they're young. And then we want to possess them and control them. Equally in marriage, the biggest problem is possessiveness and control. But we only flourish as the oak and cypress grow not in each other's shadow. We have to give freedom to our children. We have to give freedom to our husband or wife, to our loved ones, to follow their path. And I think we are only limited by what Khalil Gibran thinks is so profound.
I was going to say, I would add to that we could take it one step further, and we should give that kind of freedom to everybody to live their own path.
Of course. And how wonderful that would be too. But these are nearest and dearest, you see, and that's why possessiveness comes into play.
Yeah, but and if more people did it that way, then more people would be willing to give that freedom to others. Yeah.
So I would say to people, just read one page at a time. They're 52 pages or something, one day. Maybe one page a week. Fine. Think about it. Think about the words. Read it again. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Talk about shifting one's perceptions.
Yeah.
So book number 9 is The Alchemy of Happiness by Hazrat Inayat Khan. I'm not quite sure when that was published, but tell us about this book and how it came into your life.
Actually, I read this book after I had finished writing my 8 Disciples. It's the last book I read, actually. I think it's a series of 6 books.
Yes.
All on spirituality, and he's amazing, a really amazing book, an amazing series of books. Again, I make no apology, but it is to do with Sufism, yet not religious. It's very encompassing Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Buddhism, all good cultures on which he draws from. Let me give an example of how one of the things that I was so fascinated to read But Sandie, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Because,
I'll tell you when you've asked me.
because you are a teacher, and in so many ways, I was grappling with this concept of free will and destiny, and I was grappling how does free will work, and how does destiny come into play? What is their relationship?
You're asking me that question?
Yes, madam.
I can tell you what I think. I had a guest on the radio show a few months back, actually, who'd written a book, and basically they were saying that science has proven that we don't have free will. So I've been arguing with him ever since, in a nice way.
Yeah.
I think that there is destiny, but we have the choice as to whether we are going to step up to the plate, take notice of all of the, things pulling us towards it, and whether we go ahead with it or not. I think that's, we ultimately have the choice of whether we want to follow that destiny.
Wonderful.
That's just my view.
Wonderful. And I'm going to ask you at this point, I hope one day you let me interview you. Well, we'll talk about the letter. Let me tell you what Hazrat Inayat says, and I thought he said it really, really well, almost as good as you. He said, very often a thinking person asks whether there is free will or destiny, as it seems to him that these two cannot both exist at the same time. It is on with them as it is with light and darkness. In reality, there's no such thing as darkness. There is less light and more light. Only when they are compared do we distinguish them as light and darkness. In the same way, one can look at free will and destiny. The destiny is always at work with free will, and free will with destiny. And then what you said matters, that as you push your free will, destiny begins to work with the free will. I think you just said stepping up.
Yeah, stepping up. And I think what happens is that it draws you, and you want to follow it. So there's no question of will I or won't I.
Wonderful. Well done.
So book number 10 is, read me again, Whispers of the Beloved.
I'm sorry. I don't apologize.
Don't apologize.
No.
What a person to be so inspired by.
So this particular book, I borrowed a translation from this book for my book, and in the last chapter where I talk about gratitude, and the quote I've used is this: "When compassion fills my heart, free from all desire, I sit quietly like the earth. My silent cry echoes like thunder throughout the universe." Now, question: why is gratitude so important? Gratitude is important because if we appreciate our life, if we appreciate the great privilege of being in this world and experiencing it in our physical form, which is a rare and beautiful experience. Of course, there are hardships, but they come with the territory. So gratitude, in a pragmatic sense, gratitude is a positive thing anyway. But when you experience and acknowledge the grace in meditation, particularly, which is what Rumi is talking about, compassion fills my heart, free from all desire. I sit quietly like the earth. My silent cry echoes like thunder throughout the universe. So when we acknowledge this gratitude, we are filled with love and compassion ourselves, because that is the way it works. And when you are filled with love and compassion, then everything that you do is tainted with love and compassion. You see, people say you should change people from the outside. Oh, I'll get this person to do things this way. But this is not the answer. The answer is that you have to be inspired from the inside, so that everything that you do is tainted by this love and compassion. And how wonderful this life would be, and this earth, if we all sat for meditation, spent a bit of time going inwards and feeling this love and compassion. So I say gratitude is so important.
Yeah, that's very true. Let me ask you about the monastery.
Yeah.
The children, you've been around that, been involved for many years now. You've seen some of those children grow up. That must be an amazing experience to watch these children thrive and to be part of the team that is, helping them all become self-sufficient so that they can contribute, so that more children can come and be cared for at the monastery.
So the wonderful observation, because having been going there for the last 12 years, you're quite right. You've seen these children grow up and take shape and pursue their careers, and some become doctors, some become nurses. They're all because a monk is very careful for them to go into caring professions. He encouraged them to be carers, nurses, doctors. But the remarkable thing is this, that they all come back to help the monk. So whenever I'm there, somebody or the other comes up and, I see they've grown up. And they just come and help the monastery because they love the monastery. It's their home. And whenever they can, they come and help. So yes, it is hugely rewarding, Sandie, hugely.
I imagine some of those children have become monks themselves.
One or two, yes, some have, but one or two who were novice monks, young monks, have actually not become monks, if you see what I mean. So I think it's gone either way.
Yeah,
if you see what I mean. So,
but there are people who will continue the work of the monk that started the.
You see the main point. I know we're going back to where we started in a way, but the main point is that the monk, from the day they've come to the monastery, teaches them meditation. You see, and he would take meditation early in the morning and in the evening, the whole of the monastery, and this stays with them all their life. This is life-changing, particularly at the early days of their life. They genuinely have changed forever, because that is the time, the youth, the young children, when they take on these beautiful practices, their life has changed forever.
Yeah, the skills they have, the tools they have to cope with anything that they encounter. Yeah. Is the freedom fighter still involved?
Yes.
He is.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I was trying to. Now, this is a little bit of a secret, so it can stay between us.
Okay, just between us.
Yeah. So I was trying to send some money because we were buying some agricultural land, so that because there are refugees at the monastery now, and of course what I'm about to say is quite legitimate, so it's okay. But we can't send money to Burma because it's in civil war, effectively, and under army rule. So we had to send it to somebody in Singapore, and that's where the freedom fighter got the money from Singapore and took it to the monastery. So there you are, still hard at work.
Good. Yes, I grew rather fond of him reading your book.
Oh, you must, Sandie, you must go and meet him. You must go meet the freedom fighter, meet the monk. one day.
What a
And you'll
treat
have,
that would be.
and I'm telling you, I'll arrange it for you, promise. I'll arrange everything for you. You will never forget. Because this place has an energy about it, which is alive. Yes, as soon as this war stuff goes away, I hope, please go. Go, it'll be a holiday anyway. Amazing holiday, and an amazing country.
So how many children are there now?
There are 1,200 children.
So you've doubled the number of children, or more than double, since you first discovered it? Three times. Wow.
Yeah. I'm not responsible for those children, but...
No, but you've helped.
You've
helped bring together many people who are engaged now and supporting it. So you also teach and promote meditation at the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary in North London. Tell us a little bit about the sanctuary.
Yeah, it's strange that 12 years ago I went to the monastery in Burma, and it became my home in a sense, with so many children. Equally, some 4 or 5 years ago, when I entered the sanctuary, and there's a story again in the book is what happens. I felt as soon as I entered, I felt that was also my spiritual home. The healers, they do wonderful healing, and when I walked in, they opened every door for me. I was so privileged. They shared with me everything that I needed to know or wanted to know, and more. And particularly in the book again, particularly Craig, who's the person who's a leading light, and Cheryl also, and others, actually showed me a way that one could connect with spirit and your spirit guides, and how those that type of meditation helped me move along my spiritual path. It's a beautiful part of that journey, continuing from one place to another, and I love to go there. I love to be able to teach more meditation now that we'll be opening again. And I would say to people, please come, get in touch at the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary in London. We're happy to help you.
And it's been going for 70 years?
Oh, 60, 70 years, I'm sure.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is a long time, and I would say this is the second batch of healers, and the last one we talked about, Joan Fountain, passed away 6 months ago at the age of 97. Such a powerful healer, such an amazing medium, powerful medium, a beautiful person, and a beautiful friend. So,
what a great legacy she's left.
She has.
Yeah.
And I made some programs. And if you have 2 minutes, I'd like to share one program, one point with you. Sandie, do we have one?
Yeah.
See, whenever I went to see her, I realized she had so much teaching to offer, profound things she used to say. I used to take my camera and just let it roll, not knowing what I'd do with it. But I wanted to capture whatever she had to say. And then I ended up making some videos on YouTube and sharing them. But the most important one was the last one I made. And that was in October, I think it was, last year. And whenever I went there, I'd ask her a question, not premeditated question, anything that came to mind. So I said, Joan, tell me about the afterlife. What is it like? What happens? And of course, she started, and the camera was rolling, and I thought, my God, she's amazing. And suddenly and she described this, how beautiful it is to pass over, and how she wished people knew what it was like, because they would never fear death if they realize how beautiful it is. And suddenly her demeanor changed, as though she was there already. Okay, and she was describing the journey. Now it's on the video on YouTube, and then I realized that she was already on a journey. 2 weeks later, she passes away. But I knew that I would not see her again, because she was already on that journey, and she was describing her journey. And she was leaving a final gift, if you like, of her knowledge. And her knowledge saying, do not fear death. It's like a rebirth. It's a beautiful happening.
So before we close, tell us about your latest book, The Disciple, The Spiritual Path to Infinite Happiness.
May I show this?
You may.
And the sale proceeds, all author income goes to the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. Please buy it. And not only it is a beautiful summary of all the things that I've learned from my ustad, from my monk in Burma, from Joan Ahida and medium at Sylvan Healing Sanctuary, but also there are practical exercises on meditation and mindfulness, both Buddhist meditation and Sufi meditation. So there's a lovely book. It's a DIY book as well as a beautiful story. And I think my publisher said something. He said that, and of course the subtitle, really important. It says, A Disciple, the Spiritual Path to Infinite Happiness. Okay. So my publisher wrote an article saying that, look, for £10, if you can get infinite happiness, is money well spent. But even if you don't, it goes to charity.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
Win-win. Absolutely. Feroze Dada, thank you so much for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. It's been a delight to speak with you.
Thank you for having me, Sandie. Thank you.
My pleasure. So Feroze's books, Children of the Revolution and The Disciple, they're available at all good bookstores and online as well. For more information about the Inle Trust charity, visit the website inletrust.org.uk. And if you want to learn about the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary in London, you can visit Sylvan, Sylvan, healing.org. Before we close, a few words about the spiritual book market, which, as we all know, is becoming increasingly crowded, and that's a wonderful thing. It's so good to know that spirituality is going mainstream, but it also means that it's becoming ever more challenging to sort the wheat from the chaff, which is why we launched the No BS Spiritual Book Club. So we could provide you with trusted recommendations from authors, teachers, speakers, and others who've walked this path before you. So you can check out our free 10 Best Spiritual Books archive, the nobsspiritualbookclub.com, where you can also view previous episodes of this interview series and add your name to our Save My Space list to get last-minute reminders of upcoming episodes. And finally, if you feel that you have a book in you but don't know how to start getting it out of your head and into the hands of those who are waiting to read it, visit sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab, and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be what you've been looking for. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.